Hey everybody, welcome back to Ancient Texts Revealed. This is Dr. Heldman. This is the Search for the Scapegoat, Part 7, the mystery and the story of the scapegoat, Part 7. And in this video, what I want to talk about is the possibility that there were not one, but two creations. I need to let you know that this video is pretty late because I was on a joint. My wife retired in last October. I retired in May. We had a wedding anniversary in October, so we took a big, long, extended European river cruise trip. We're just getting back from that, just getting going again, so I apologize for the delay. This should be a very informative movie. It should be helpful for you in terms of figuring out the exegesis of Genesis 1. Now let's get started. So this particular teaching that we're embarking on right now is not something that's in the majority of churches, whether you're Pentecostal, Baptist, whatever you are. Most churches do not teach this, although if you go out doing some research, you'll find that a lot of different theologians had an idea about this topic. And the concept is this: were there one creation or were there two creations? Or more accurately, was there an initial creation in which it was a very serene, pristine planet, and Satan got involved and it wound up having to be destroyed in a flood? And then there was a second creation in which man came about and the beasts and all that stuff, and that was again destroyed by a flood. So we could safely say that there was an initial creation and then a recreation. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. This is called the Pre-Adamite theory, and it is embraced by quite a few theologians. As you start doing research on this, you'll find that there are those who embrace this teaching. You should be aware that it'll get you kicked out of all the best churches. I don't think it should be divisive like that. It's not a matter of salvation. It doesn't determine whether you're saved or not saved. It's simply your opinion on whether there were one or two creations. There's actually four worlds we'll talk about here in a minute. And at one time, I want you to know that I was a young earther. Young earther means that we believe in 6 literal days of creation and nothing beyond that. However, that does not jive with some of the ways that scientists are dating some of this stuff. And so I've always wondered, well, is there, a second part to this? So the pre-Adamite theory might answer this for you, and I'll tell you why. Because we can say that the second creation of the earth was somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago, accurately 6,000 years ago. But we can also say that we recognize that there are dating features that go on that prove or show that things are much, much older, and this would be where the first creation would come in. Now, I'd like to have you know that in neither case do any of these theologians, nor myself, endorse the theory of evolution, because my opinion is that that's trying to do away with God. God did create these things. They did not evolve. They were created to be in what one theologian called your lane, and so, they're going to stay in that lane. So that's where I'm at with that. But it does make me rethink being a young earther. In other words, the question might be, are both possible? Now, as I said before, there's 4 different versions of the earth. There's what is called the first world, the pre-Adamic world. This is found in Genesis 1 and 2. We'll look at that in just a minute. And the theologians that have studied this, researched this, I think there's a lot of good evidence for this, have said that all of the earth's life forms were destroyed by this particular judgment. All life forms, including marine life and vegetation. Then in Genesis 1:3, this is called the pre-Noahic world, before Noah, or the world is recreated, but God causes a global flood to devastate. So there's a difference in the words. Destroy means there was a cataclysm that destroyed everything, all life. And then devastate means that all life, with the exception of life that was on the ark, and in marine life and vegetation, were preserved, but all of the life that could not swim or could not grow, that was not on the ark, would not be. And the example that theologians will give you is, well, Noah didn't take 2 of every seed on the ark. He did not take 2 of every fish on the ark. And that's where they're getting the idea that, well, maybe this was more of a devastating flood where it destroyed living things apart from marine life and vegetation life. And that's called Noah's flood. The first flood is called the flood of Lucifer, and there's a reason for that. The second flood in Genesis 1:3 is called the Noah's flood. Now, after the flood, we are in what's called the present world, and this is post-Noahic. We know that the destruction of the world will be by fire, and it will ultimately happen because of sin, but this judgment has not yet occurred. And then finally, there's a fourth world that will come about. This is spoken of in Numbers 14:21 and Revelation 21, in which God's reign is established on the earth. It's the theocracy that all the progressive atheists dread, and it is filled with the glory of the Lamb. So we've got these 4 different versions of earth, and we're predominantly focused on this pre-Adamic world in this slide deck. Let me go back one. Okay, now let's take a look at Genesis 1:1. I've done this before in a different movie, but this is a very interesting piece of scripture. Bereshit bara Elohim eth ha-shamayim eth ha-eretz. And what we're saying is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, we want to do some exegesis on that and pay attention to these 3 words, created, heavens, and earth. So created, that word is bara. And it's Strong's H1254. It literally means to create or shape or form. So bara is a very, very important word in terms of us talking about God creating the universe and the planets and everything else that's in. Now, heavens is shamayim, and we have talked about this before. When something ends in an im, it has the im sound. That means it's a plural word. So in this case, heavens is shamayim. It's a plural word. It's Strong's 8064, and it indicates that there could be more than one heaven. And you'll remember that in 2 Corinthians 12:2, Paul's talking about a man that he knew that was snatched up into the third heaven. So the concept is that there are multiple heavens. And then earth is the eretz. And this is singular, and you can think dirt. It's a single word. It just means literally dirt or earth, or the earth as it is. Now, what we want to talk about is the Big Bang Theory. So astrophysicists have the ability to do a measuring technique that they use, knowing the speed of light and knowing the Einsteinian equations. They have been able to evidently figure out that the Earth is approximately, the Big Bang occurred about 13.787 billion years ago. So at some juncture, God spoke things into being, and I think this was the Big Bang, and everything shot out from there. And if that's the case, can Christians agree that the Earth or creation is quite old, and that the young Earth opinion might not be correct, or it's only partially correct? I misspelled partially there. And what that means is that if we're considering just the creation in which Adam was created, that is a second creation, and there was an entire world prior to that that we probably know very, very little about. That's the point that we're trying to make there. Okay, now Jesus was there at the very first creation. And we know this from the book of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. And in him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness. And who is the Word? Well, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. So Jesus is the Word, and we're told here that in the very, very beginning, he was there. Jesus is an eternal creature. Jesus was not created. He is a part of God, and he is an eternal being. And unlike the angels who were created, that are now eternal. Now, as a result of this, the angels shouted for joy. So when they saw this very first creation, boom, Big Bang, all these planets and universes and whatever start shooting out, and the earth is made. And I'm not saying that the earth is the center of the universe. I'm just saying that our attention is focused on the earth because that's where the Bible is focused on. The angels shouted for joy. This is out of Job 38. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know, or who stretched a line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened, or who laid its cornerstone? This is the important part. When the morning stars sang together. So here's our Big Bang creation. The morning stars sing together. All the sons of God. These are called the B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. These are the angels. They shouted for joy. So I don't know if you know this. We're talking about this word Elohim, which can be used to be talking about God, the Trinity, because Elohim is plural, but also when we say B'nai Elohim, the sons of God, that's a figure of speech that's found throughout the Old Testament. It means it's talking about angels. Okay, now, did God make a mistake then? So God creates the earth, this first creation, and boom, it implodes. And I think it took hundreds of thousands of years to do this. There was life on that creation. It's not life like we know it now, but there was life on this creation, and it was a long, long creation. We'll see that in a minute here. And so the question is, well, did God make a mistake in the sense that did he not create a pristine world? But we're going to talk about a word here called tohu. There it is right here. And it means vain. So we know out of Isaiah 45:18, for thus says the Lord, who created the heavens, who is God, who formed the earth and made it, who was established, who did not create it in vain. So the point here with this verse is that we're looking at this very, very first creation, and it was not created in vain, and yet it found its way into chaos. What happened? That's the point with this verse. God did not create it in vain. Tohu. Now, we need to understand this word tohu because it's throughout the scriptures here. Let's take a look at this. The earth and the heavens were in a pristine state. Everything was good. The sun, the morning stars were happy. The angels were shouting. Everything is a beautiful thing. And something happened. Now, this is where Genesis 1:2 comes into place. So Genesis 1:1 says that God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:2 says the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Now, this is prior to God creating the earth, in which he created Adam and populated it with the animals and things like that. So this is prior to that. This is the so-called gap theory. There is a gap of, who knows, tens or hundreds of thousands or even millions of years that occurred on a completely different creation, and then something happened. And I need to have you understand these words. First of all, the word was. Now, that seems pretty innocuous, right? Was means was. But the word is haya in the Hebrew. It's Strong's H 1961, and it means to be or to become or to come to pass. So we should not say the earth was haya. The earth became without form. The word form is tohu, and what it means is formlessness, confusion, unreality, emptiness, wasteland, wilderness. So here's this beautiful, pristine planet. God creates the universe, speaks the whole thing into being. And by the way, we don't have any idea about whether there are other universes out there. That's a whole different speculation. That's not where I want to go, but I do think there's room for that, to talk about that at some point. He creates this pristine planet. It's beautiful. Everything's right. And the angels smile and they laugh at this and they applaud God for this. And then something happens, some interminable number of years later, and the earth became without form and void, which the word is bohu, so it was empty. It was a wasteland. And we say, you'll hear it, people say, tohu va bohu. Now, the word va in Hebrew means and. We could also say it as wa. So tohu wa bohu or tohu va bohu both mean without form, tohu, and void, bohu. Tohu va bohu. And darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. The word is actually to brood or to cry over it, to be sorry about it. So God was sorry that he had to do this, that this had happened. And the waters covered up the entire earth. That's the point. So there was a state of tohu vabohu. A flood happened. We call it the flood of Lucifer. And it destroyed the entire earth. Everything in it. Marine life, vegetation, animals, birds, you name it, they were all destroyed. So let's take a look at this. Now, the word tohu, I want to remind you again that at creation time, God did not make the earth tohu. We saw that in Isaiah 45:18. So he said, I did not make this in vain, tohu. It became vain, tohu vabohu. What? Well, so two thoughts immediately come to mind. If the world, I'm calling it the first creation, had been created in a pristine state, but suddenly entered a state of chaos at a time which we do not know, what caused this to happen? The questions would be, how long did God's initial creation exist before it became without form of void? Tohu vabohu. And what predicated this change? There was chaos introduced on the earth. So let's now talk about the fall of Lucifer. Lucifer was an angel, and he decided that he was going to be like the Most High. And he is the one who was thrown out of heaven and became Satan. Now, people that talk about the Pre-Adamite theory refer to the fall of Lucifer, that this is the predicating moment that happened when Lucifer was thrown to the earth, and that's what caused him to get the entire earth going in the direction of sin, and that's what caused God to say, I've had enough, I've got to destroy the earth. Let's find out who Lucifer was. Well, first of all, it says there are a couple of key chapters you can read, and they're easy to remember. So it's Isaiah 14, so it's a major prophet, Isaiah 14, and Ezekiel 28. So you just add 14 to it, and you get Ezekiel 28, major prophet 28. Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, these are the stories of the fall of Lucifer. The name Lucifer is not a bad name, by the way. It means light bearer. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones. That is quite the picture, isn't it? He was a very, very powerful angel. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created until iniquity was found in you. And by the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore, I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. Well, that's a lot. Now, the other thing you need to know about is that we're also talking about the Prince of Tyre, and Tyre is a shipping community that's up in northwest along the Mediterranean, and so there was a prophecy against the king of Tyre as well as against Lucifer. But this is talking about Lucifer here, and we know that because he says, I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. So this is Satan, Lucifer. He was Lucifer when he was in heaven. He became Satan when he was cast out of heaven. And it says that he was doing some trading. That's the important part that we want to pay attention to. And it looks as though this trading might have been discovered even while he was in heaven and able to go up and down. You remember that the angels were able to climb up ladders into heaven and back down. So we don't know. We just don't know that. We're speculating at this point, but that we know that Lucifer fell. So let's talk about Lucifer. Your idea is when you go to Hobby Lobby, you're going to see what's called a cherub. There's a picture of a cherub there, and they're lovely little baby angels with wings on them, and they have fat little legs and arms and stuff like that. And that Lucifer was not An archangel, he was a cherub, and a cherub does not look like the thing that you buy at Hobby Lobby. He was created by God. He was a guardian who is responsible for leading in the worship of God. The scripture talks about his timbrels and pipes. Evidently, he was a very good singer, musician. He led in the worship of God. Angels, including Lucifer, were created before day one of the 6 days of creation, with which we are familiar. So the angels, we looked at a scripture prior to that, were created prior to creation, but they are created beings, but now they are immortal beings. Okay, let's talk some more about the fall of Lucifer. It's denoted in Isaiah 14:12 through 21, Ezekiel 28:11 through 19. Lucifer was ejected from heaven, subsequently became Satan. What did he do that was so bad? He uttered 5 I wills. So this is a pride thing. He had a lot of pride. Let's take a look at these real quick. Satan's 5 I wills were, and this is God talking to him, you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the congregation. On the farther sides of the north. That's an interesting phrase because it implies northhood to heaven, if there is such a thing as that. It's worth researching on your own. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. A couple of things to observe here. He must have seen the creation, the initial creation, saw the stars being born and said, I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to go beyond that. And then he said, I will be like the Most High. He did not say that he would be the Most High because he knew it wasn't be possible to be the Most High because he was a created being and God is an eternal being. Now, Jesus saw Lucifer fall. It's in Luke 10. It says, and he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. This is very, very interesting to me because lightning is moving at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. So he fell, boom, right down, right very fast. And we also know from the book of Revelation that he took 1/3 of the angels with him when he fell. Another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great and fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 diadems. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. So Satan knew about Jesus. He knew about the prophecies of Jesus. And he was out to get rid of Jesus. That was one of his huge, big momentums. So out of pride was how he fell. Now let's talk about Jeremiah. So Jeremiah knew about the fall of Satan. So look, it says, it appears that the prophet Jeremiah wrote about the earth at the time and its destruction. I beheld the earth. So this is Jeremiah writing now. And indeed it was without form. So it was tohu and void, bohu, tohu vabohu. And the heavens, they had no light. So this initial creation was lighted only by God. God had not created light yet. So this is in Genesis 1:3 when that whole process starts. Prior to this time, there was no light. I beheld the mountains, and indeed they trembled, and all the hills moved back and forth. I beheld, and indeed there was no man. It's true, there was no man on the earth. All the birds of the heavens had fled. I beheld, and indeed the fruitful land was a wilderness, and all its cities were broken down. So there were cities in this first creation, and at the presence of the Lord by his fierce anger. So let's see if we can piece together what's happening. God makes his creation. There are animals, plants, aquatic life. Who knows what was on this initial earth, this creation? These beings built cities, and they were engaging in commerce. And we have really no idea the level of intelligence or the level of abilities that they had or the things that they created then. We do know that they were not men, but it's very possible that they were hominids as opposed to men, and that doesn't mean that they were not intelligent. And he says, I beheld, and indeed a fruitful hand was a wilderness, for thus says the Lord, the whole land shall be desolate, yet I will not make a full end. Meaning, if we're talking about the first creation, it was tohu vabohu, and he destroys it, he knows that he's going to go forward and recreate the creation. So the second creation, we could say, is a recreation. For this shall the earth mourn, and all the heavens will be black, because I have spoken, I have purposed, and I will not relent, and I will not turn back. So that's Jeremiah 4. Now, the pre-Adamite theologians claim that there was a time when Satan was cast to earth. There were kings, kingdoms, nations, and commerce. How did they arrive at this? So it says, again, Isaiah 14, how you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, how are you cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations? So in my mind, and I'm just theorizing this now, in my mind, Satan has had some ability to go into and out of heaven for a certain amount of time. For example, when he was condemning Job, he went into heaven and accused Job before God. So that would be where I'm getting that from. And so he's down there, and here's this creation, and there are these beings and this beautiful creation of God, and there's these cities, and so now he is weakening the nations. According to Isaiah 14, Satan made a wreck of the earth at that time. Those who will see you will gaze at you and consider you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook the kingdoms, who made the earth as a wilderness, and destroyed its cities, who did not open the house of his prisoners? This is Isaiah 14. So it's talking about Satan is thrown down to the earth, and he is ridiculed, and the ordinary creatures of the earth, the people that they're not people, I'm assuming they're hominids, intelligent hominids, are making fun of him and saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble? So why was Lucifer cast out? Well, he was engaged in trading. By the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence, and you sinned, and therefore I cast you out as a profane thing from the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. Now, I want you to remember that Ezekiel 28 is a comparison between the real king of Tyre as compared to Satan, so they're heavily intertwined. These are both intermixed one with another. And in the case of Satan's fall, theologians say that his trading meant his travel in and merchandising of deceit, pride, and violence. These are the very same products, if you will, that he is selling today. You know, we can be proud of ourselves. We can say that people are full of deceit today. There's a lot of deceit going on. There's pride, there's violence. We should not be surprised by this, because we're told that Satan comes as an angel of light, but yet he roams the earth, seeking about the earth as a lion, seeking whom he might be able to kill or destroy. He's a destroyer. He's a killer. He's a liar. So that was what he was doing. He was trading. And you can imagine if he's saying, oh, you know, King so-and-so, I will give you this because I can make this king believe that. You know, he's doing these backhouse deals, that kind of a thing. He was trading. He was trading something. We don't know exactly what. Were these things that these beings that Satan was trading with men? No, we are distinctly told in Scripture that Adam was the first man. 1 Corinthians 15:45, and so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. The pre-Adamite idea says that the second creation, what I'm going to call the recreation, as it were, was the one in which Adam came about. But in the initial creation, man, as we're accustomed to calling man, did not exist. Who were these creatures then, or men? Were they prehistoric hominids? Were the dinosaurs on the earth? Yes, I believe that they were at that time. Were there other creatures? We can only speculate. Okay, now let's talk about a very, very interesting thing called the Sumerian king list. So you should be aware that we're talking about Assyria, Babylon, that area of Mesopotamia, the Sumers. It's called the Sumerian king list. They spoke Sumerian. They wrote in a language on tablets called cuneiform. They're also known as the Chronicle of the One Monarchy. It's an ancient document that's been written in Sumeria. It's inscribed on tables in cuneiform. You can still see them today. And in the document, lines 1 through 39 are antediluvian. They're prior to the flood. These lines talk about 8 kings of 5 separate cities. Now, I would submit to you that we are talking about the flood of Lucifer, not the flood of Noah. And the reason why is because these kings have incredibly long lifespans, on the order of tens of thousands of years. So I believe that these kings that are on the Sumerian king list, the SKL as it's called, actually are from the first creation, not the second creation. Now, I've been to the Louvre. We just got back from the Louvre in Paris. They have a wonderful Assyrian floor where they have all of these different things that were discovered in Assyria. And these drawings and these carvings are pretty cool. They're pretty interesting to look at these creatures and how they came about. Now, there were 8 antediluvian pre-flood kings, and I think that these were kings that were on the earth in the first creation. And you can see that there's Alulim of Eridu and Alal-Gar of Eridu and so forth. And so Eridu was the primary city. And you could think of it maybe, I guess, as the Garden of Eden, I don't know, because it's in that vicinity there. But look at how long these kings lived. So Alulim lived for 28,800 years. Now, if you believe that is a real number of years, then we are clearly not looking at the second creation, which was 6,000 years ago. We're looking at something that lasted much, much longer, given this list of kings that were on the earth at that time. After the kingship descended from heaven. Oh, well, now who were these kings that descended from heaven? The kingship was in Eridu. So evidently, and we can only surmise a little bit out of this, you have to kind of think about, okay, what really happened here? Pray about it, ask God about it. But they were saying that there was some sort of a kingship. It descended from heaven, and it didn't fall, but it was placed in Eridu, this beautiful place. 2 kings of Eridu are mentioned before the city fell and the kingship was taken to Bad Tibera. That's quite the name. This pattern of cities receiving kingship and then falling or being defeated only to be succeeded by the next is present throughout the entire SKL text, often in the exact same words. The first section lists 8 kings who ruled over 5 cities, and these include Larag and Zimber and Shuruppak. The duration of their reign is given. In the first section, the reigns vary between 43,200 and 28,800 years, for a total of nearly 250,000 years. The section ends with the line, get this, then the flood swept over. So here are these 8 kings on the earth. Among these kings mentioned in this section is the ancient Mesopotamian god Dumuzid, known as Tammuz. That is a hint for us that there were false gods on the planet at this time. So the question would be, naturally, were these angels that were kicked out of heaven, did they become the kings? Are these humanoids? What kind of beings were these? Now, this is where Eridu is right there. You can see it right there. It's right at the northwest corner of the Persian Gulf. Tigris and Euphrates rivers feed into it. You can see Babylon up here. This is the Sumer region. The Akkadians, which later became the Assyrians, Elam. So this area here is we're talking about Eridu. Now, what's interesting about this is here is a real-life picture of some baked bricks. And Eridu is northwest of Nasiriyah, Iraq. So it's in Iraq. And it's desolate as heck now, isn't it? Look at this. It's very desolate. And this here is a ziggurat. Now, I don't know if you know what a ziggurat is, but it is a pyramid that's built in a certain style. The Mayas, the Incans, they built ziggurats. This is a ziggurat, and this is the only thing that's left from Eridu. So it's very, very interesting that there would be something like this. Now, the Sumerian king list includes Enki. Enki is also known as Ea, so either way you want to go, you can call it either way. It's Enki is known as Ea and is the city of god Eridu. And interestingly, the temple of Enki, this god that lived in Eridu, or gods that lived in Eridu, The temple is said to be constructed out of pure gold and out of lapis lazuli. It is a beautiful bright blue stone. I've put the picture of lapis lazuli up over here for you. Reminds me of the color of the sky on good days. And we know that this is one of the stones in which Lucifer was covered. So it says here, and I took this out of the New Living Testament so you can see that they do mention it. The King James Version doesn't list it quite this way. Ezekiel 28:13, you were in Eden, the garden of God. Well, that was probably Eridu. Your clothing was adorned with every precious stone, red carnelian, pale green peridot, white moonstone, blue-green beryl, onyx, green jasper, blue, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and emerald, all beautifully crafted for you and set in the finest gold. And then when we jump over here, we see that the temple in Eridu is constructed of gold and lapis lazuli. Its foundation was on the nether sea. It was filled in by the river of Supar, which is the Euphrates. So there you go. That's what we're dealing with here. That's very interesting to me. Now, we should talk about the Apkallu. Dr. Michael Heiser said, you have to really study the Apkallu to be able to understand what was happening in Mesopotamia and these early civilizations that even, in my opinion, predate the flood of Noah. So the Apkallu were said to have served as advisors or protectors to these early kings. And in some traditions, the Apkallu themselves are depicted as serving these kings directly, teaching them the arts of civilization. So now we're back to, okay, maybe these were physical kings and not fallen angels, but the Apkallu were fallen angels, and they took on the form of different things. Like here is one Apkallu. He has a fish hat on. This is very common, being a fish. He's carrying a purse of some kind. And there are other Apkallu that you can look at that take on some sort of a different montage. So the Apkallu were beings that were there to help these kings in terms of agriculture, building cities, and writing. And so they were considered to be the guardians of knowledge. Why? Well, we've talked about this before. If I'm an angel and I'm in the presence of God and I can see things that are going, and I don't know, do you go to angel school? Like, do you go to angel university and you get taught all these different subjects about what God has created and how it works and things? I have no idea. But they had knowledge and they imparted it to these kings on the SKL. And so, it's all speculation, but somehow these civilizations got built. Like this ziggurat got built, and why a ziggurat? That's a whole nother subject in terms of the immense communications web that was on the planet at that time. But it was there. It is known about. Now, a question about the Apkallu. Is it possible that during the initial creation, God appointed angels to advise the kings on the SKL? Or is it possible that these weird, here's one that's like a hawk here, human feet, carrying a purse, has wings. Is it possible that these weird malformed beasts, with the heads or bodies of different creatures such as a fish or a hawk or others, are fallen angels whom Satan had charged with advising the kings? Or do you suppose it's some of both? Maybe the king started out as well-meaning, but subsequently began to listen to the lies of the enemy, and thus the world was corrupted. We just simply have no way of knowing. What we know, or what we think we know, is that the earth was very, very old, that God put it into being, spoke it into being, and it was pristine, and there were beings on the earth, and they were not human beings. They were a different kind of being, and there were kings on the earth at that point, and cities, and trade, and commerce. And there were people, or angels in this case, the Apkallu, that were helping them and advising them. And at some point, things went off the rails and got so bad that God said, I need to destroy the entire thing. Now, how did the Lucifer flood begin? This is a very interesting question. So, some theologians think that this began with an asteroid hitting the earth. I think there's a very logical process for that. I think this makes a lot of sense. Once God determined that the Lucifer flood must come about, how did he destroy the world? Some theorize that at least one asteroid, I've read theologians who think that there may have been several, and perhaps the congruence of several asteroids that hit the Earth within a close period may have been what caused the cataclysmic flood. There was a cataclysmic flood. I think it's very easy to think that Chicxulub, it's on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, was the asteroid that caused this to happen. So this was an asteroid that was the size of a city. It collided with the Earth 66 million years ago, which could easily fit within our time frame, creating an impact crater of 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter. This thing was big, and remember that this asteroid was traveling at thousands of miles per hour when it hit. This wasn't a small thing. And it's F equals ma, guys. It's force equals mass times acceleration. This thing was massive. This is a law of Einstein. This thing was massive, the size of a city. It was traveling at thousands of miles per hour, and it hit the Earth, created an impact crater that is 15 kilometers in diameter. Scientists believe that this collision would have been enough to cause the dinosaur extinction. I think that dinosaurs were on the Earth at that time. Hominids were on the Earth at that time. Pterodactyls, etc. We don't have any idea, apart from this, what the Earth looked like at that time. But I do think that the first creation, the flood of Lucifer, and that creation period is something in which we could talk about, well, this is where the dinosaurs existed, prehistoric man existed. There were some other asteroid collisions that you should be aware of that you might want to research. There was one in Free State, South Africa. It's called the Vredefort Dome. Ontario, Canada had what's called the Sudbury Basin. Siberia had what's called the Crater of Diamonds, because this thing created diamonds once it hit the Earth. And then South Australia has the Ackermann impact structure. Now, scientists believe that these were at different times. So I'm not at all saying that all of these go together. I'm just saying that there are certain theologians that postulate, well, maybe they all did happen at once, and that's how the flood came about. Now, this is the Chicxulub. It's called the Chicxulub impactor. It's in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. If you've been to Cancun, you have been on the Yucatan Peninsula, and so it's just to the northwest of there. There are several interesting points that we should consider when we're talking about Chicxulub. Rocks from deep within the Earth's crust, when Chicxulub hit, were raised 25 kilometers high. That's an enormous distance. And a rim of mountains taller than the Himalayas were formed around the crater's edge. So this was a massive collision. This thing created a lot of devastation. The asteroid had hit at 20 kilometers per second from an angle of 60 degrees. Just right for sending the maximum amount of vaporized rock into the atmosphere. So it hit so hard and so fast, you could compare it to a nuclear explosion that vaporized rock, sent it into the atmosphere all around the world. It was exactly the right angle and the right speed to make this happen. It created what's called an impact winter, and I don't know if you've heard of a nuclear winter before, this term nuclear winter, but what it means is nothing's going to live. It can't grow, it can't breathe, there's no light, there's deep, dark, cold, everything dies. It all dies. And so the resulting impact winter created, get this, sulfur-based gases, caused sulfur-based gases. I don't know if you know this or not, but you can't breathe sulfur. Very poisonous. And fine, I said fine there, but I should have said fine, F-I-N-E, fine dust particles to block the sun's rays. This winter lasted 15 years. So it's, even if you were inside this winter and you're trying your best to survive, you aren't going to make it. Nothing's going to make it through this. The plan was to completely, utterly destroy it. All vegetation, all life forms, everything on the planet was destroyed. Everything perished in the cataclysm of this event. And then Genesis 1:3, the recreation begins. And that's where the lights of heaven, the stars, the planets, all that stuff are recreated. Man is created. The beasts are put back on the earth. But please remember that in the flood of Noah, Noah did not take on any marine life. He didn't take 2 of every fish. He didn't take 2 of every seed. He just took life forms that could fit on the ark. 2 of each that were unclean beasts, and 7 of each which were clean beasts. And so it is, this second creation was possible to go forward and begin to make things that grew. We know, for example, that Noah, as soon as he got out of the ark, planted a vineyard and began making wine. So we know that. So this stuff made it through the flood. So I want to talk to you about now, all I want to say is I want to wrap up. Now I know this is a really, really tough teaching. I know that it's something that you might not give party to. You might not be a party to it. You might say this is nonsense. That's fine. This is not a salvation-changing message. It's just something for your consideration, that a lot of people, a lot of theologians do believe in a first creation, the flood of Lucifer, and then in a second creation, the flood of Noah. And that's all I wanted to share with you today. So I hope you have a great day. God bless you. May the Lord bless you and provide for you. And I hope you get something out of this. Please like and subscribe to this channel. I love it when people like, subscribe, comment. I understand that this material is really sort of interesting, but it's also can get you in a lot of trouble with people who are very adamant about their doctrine. I'm just trying to give you different opinions and different sources. And the YouTube is full of trainings on this, so it's something that you can go and investigate more. Okay, have a great day. God bless you. See you later.